The offseason is officially underway, which means all around baseball, it's Shohei Ohtani time. Everybody talking about Shohei, including Giants fans in this mailbag edition of the show. But we're not just going to focus on Ohtani. What if the Giants don't get him? Obviously, I think people have been conditioned to not expect the Giants to land the big fish.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, or your last listen. As many of you know, I've moved, and these episodes are coming out at crazy times. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. Please hit that subscribe button, though, wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started, a mailbag edition of the show. Thank you again so much to everyone who submitted questions. You guys, driving the show today, and thank you. The first kind of batch of questions are kind of several hypothetical off seasons, and kind of I'm being asked to evaluate, like, if this is what they did, if this is what the Giants did, would it be a success or a failure? And it starts with Shohei Ohtani. And actually, we're going to tie a couple Ohtani questions together and then get back to kind of, would this be a success or failure? So Smart Sports says, in a dream world, scenario 1, Shohei Ohtani. Scenario 2, Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Jung-hoo Lee. Scenario 3, Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger. Which would you prefer and why? And so, it's a little bit tough to answer the question. And like, assuming, like, you're saying, like, okay, you get Shohei Ohtani, but you get nobody else. I don't think that works. I think they need more. Like, they can't just get one player, and they wouldn't. That's the thing, too. But I think for me, there's no way I can answer anyone but Shohei Ohtani here. And also there's no way that if they got Ohtani, that's all that they would do. And actually, so I'll say maybe my favorite of the next two options, Yamamoto and Lee, or Snell and Bellinger. I'm going to go with Yamamoto and Lee. They're both young, and Blake Snell, he's been so good, but he has such command issues, and he's kind of been up and down. And Bellinger, there's actually a question about him later. He was so bad for a couple of years there before a bounce-back season this year. So I'm rolling the dice on two unknowns in Yoshinobu Yamamoto out of Japan and Jung-hoo Lee out of Korea. I think both of whom are like around 25 years old. And Yamamoto expected to get a contract north of maybe $200 million. But how can you not just take Ohtani there? I'm just not overthinking it and taking Ohtani. Drew says, if the Giants somehow, someway sign Ohtani, how much money will they have left to spend on other pieces? They're not just one piece away from contending, even if that piece is the best player in the world. And that's basically what I just said, right? I just said, you can't just get Shohei Ohtani. And this question I can answer a lot better by Monday, when we officially know about opt-out decisions with Michael Conforto and Sean Manaea specifically, because we heard today, and it was Ross Stripling literally said it himself earlier in during the end of the season, around the end of the season, that he was not opting out. And we heard today officially he is not opting out. So that kind of plays a role. Like Manaea and Conforto would combine for like $30 million for next year's payroll. I also think, based on comments by Giants chairman Greg Johnson, he did indicate they were willing to even exceed the luxury tax for the right player at the right time. And so it just depends on what their payroll is, what they figure their payroll to be. I'm always saying I think that people are overestimating the contract that Ohtani ultimately gets. When I hear people talking about $700-800 million, I just do not see it that way, because I mean, first of all, he's not going to pitch next year, and that cuts into the contract sum. Like, not a huge amount, but a significant amount. He's not going to pitch, and he's just going to be a DH. A great DH, but no pitching. And that, like, even if he was pitching, I would say it wouldn't be enough, like you're saying. So I just don't think, when we're talking average annual value, I don't think we're looking too much higher than the top average annual values that we've seen in history. And last year I looked at Aaron Judge and the fact that he got $40 million a year. It was the most average annual value for a position player in the history of the game. And the Giants are the ones that, from what we understand, kind of set the market with that offer of 9 years, $360 million, which comes out to $40 million a year. And so I just don't see Ohtani. The people who say like he's getting $800 million, they're just saying double it, and they're thinking because he's a hitter and he's a pitcher, just double it. But it doesn't work that way to me, because he's not Aaron Judge in the sense that he's not also playing in the outfield when he's hitting, or like when he's in the lineup. He's a DH, and that has, like, imagine if Jock Peterson was good against lefties and righties and good defensively and a good base runner. He would be so much more valuable than he is as just a platoon DH. And so, I mean, Ohtani is certainly no platoon player, but he doesn't play in the field. He's just a DH, and that hurts his value in the sense that he's not going to be paid as a hitter like Aaron Judge, in my opinion. And pitching-wise, he's not even going to pitch next year. And so anyway, I don't see him getting too much more than $40 million a year. Like, I would be mildly surprised if he gets $50 million a year. I think it's going to be more like he's going to beat out Judge, but maybe like $45 million a year over probably a bit of a longer term than Judge, because he's a couple years younger. But like 11 years at $45 million a year, you're still getting right around $500 million. And that may be what I see. Anyway, how much money would they have to spend? Like, committing 40 plus million to one player is certainly a lot, but they would have more money to spend. It just depends on what they're willing to spend. And again, this $30 million that basically pays for what I'm saying Ohtani's salary would be next year. If Conforto and Manaea opt out, there's $30 million. And, if I'm talking 40, 45, that's only 15 million more than they would have committed to those guys anyway. And so it's not so much, when you talk about these contracts, it's not so much about the average annual value. It's more about, like, when we look at, oh my God, it's $500 million, but it's like, what is it per year? That's more important to think about. And, Judge got 40. I just don't see Ohtani. I would be shocked. I said mildly surprised. I would be really surprised if he got 50 plus million per year, personally. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, more questions and answers. Like I said, we're going to get into more hypotheticals. Like, would it be a success if the Giants were to get this player and that player? We got a few of those and much more coming up for you in just a minute. And before we get into it, though, today's episode is brought to you by our very good friends over at FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I admit to being like a 49ers casual, but something that I just checked out on FanDuel was what are their Super Bowl winning odds, and they are just barely not the favorites. They're last I checked, third favorites. The Eagles and the Chiefs, I think, are plus 500, and the Niners at plus 600. But if you're betting on the money line to get that $150 in bonus bets by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon to place that $5 bet and get up to get $150 back in bonus bets if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, here we go. We're going to get into more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday. I actually cannot promise that I'm going to do an episode over the weekend. I said earlier that I would to make up for an episode I missed. If you haven't heard, I moved, but I'm not feeling great, and I just can't promise that I'm going to be able to do an episode over the weekend. But for sure, back on Monday. So yeah. But on Monday, we're probably going to know Bob Melvin's coaching staff. We're probably going to we're definitely going to find out about Manaea and Conforto and whether or not they're opting in. And that plays a huge role. And we're going to know about Alex Cobb. That's another one. The Giants' decision whether or not to bring back Alex Cobb is due by Monday. And it's the qualifying offer deadline. So Monday's going to be extremely interesting. So please come back. We are Monday through Friday, even in the off season, outside of a brief period when we do 3 days a week. Anyway, next question from NDE The Rock, who says, would an off season where the Giants walk away with Jordan Montgomery and Jung-hoo Lee and Matt Chapman be a success, or do they have to sign one of the top two free agents or trade for Juan Soto? So Montgomery, Lee, and Chapman, that would be like a solid offseason, but Montgomery is like a solid mid-rotation starter, maybe even a little more than that perhaps. And Jung-hoo Lee is kind of an unknown, but he's a center fielder with like elite contact skills and defense and speed from what I understand. I haven't watched a lot of him. Power, definitely a question mark with Lee, but nonetheless, I think he's going to be pretty highly sought after, and we know the Giants have scouted him, as we literally saw a video of the Giants general manager, Pete Patella, watching Jung-hoo Lee's last at bat in Korea. And Matt Chapman is a good player, but a flawed player. Like, I think that a lot of Giants fans would love the defense for sure at third base, but offensively, kind of low batting average, swing and miss. He kind of reminds me of JD Davis in a lot of ways, but maybe with the difference being that he is like always consistently elite defensively. They do have differences. Chapman hits for more power. JD Davis, believe it or not, hits for more kind of average and on base percentage. So anyway, I would think that I wouldn't call that a success if that was all that they did. I would call it more like a mediocre offseason. But do they have to sign one of the top two? I don't know who the other. Are we talking Ohtani or Yamamoto as the top two? Certainly Ohtani is number one, but some have like Cody Bellinger as number two. So I don't know. They don't have to sign Ohtani to have a successful offseason, in my opinion. And they don't have to trade for Juan Soto, nor do I think they will. But yeah, I got to move on. That's the best I'm going to answer that. For now, Bay Area Champ says, if we walked away with Blake Snell and Matt Chapman, would you consider it a success or a failure of an offseason? So I would consider it, again, like I would be intrigued. Blake Snell is probably going to win the Cy Young Award. He doesn't really fit the profile of the type of pitcher that they've liked. Giants, even this year, when they didn't have a lot of success, they had the best, i.e. lowest walk rate in the major leagues. And, Blake Snell, even with his success, is a guy who walks a lot of people. And so that, I'm just not sure he's the pitcher that they go after in a offseason when the strength to me is starting pitching. And you've got guys like Yamamoto, and you've got, Aaron Nola. There's plenty of guys. And then Chapman, like I said, he's like a good player, but a flawed player. So I would be intrigued by Snell. Probably going to win the Cy Young Award. Like I said, he's been really, really, really good for the last year and a half, or just 2 years really. But I don't know. I would consider it. I don't like to think in such black and white terms, like it's either a success or a failure, but I don't think it would be enough. I think they would need to do more than that. And the next question is coming from Matthew, who says, what is Farhan's biggest priority first thing Monday? Ohtani, I'm assuming, is going to visit several organizations, and Yamamoto is still playing in the Japan series. Is it Jung-hoo Lee, Bellinger, Snell, pitching, hitting? I would assume they have a game plan or should have one. So they definitely have one. They're not just like, oh, it's the offseason suddenly, like, oh, oops, we should have thought of something. So they definitely have a plan. But the way the MLB offseason works is that not a lot happens starting on Monday when full free agency opens. There's all this other stuff that needs to get taken care of, like the qualifying offer, tendering contracts, like non-tendering versus tendering contracts to players. And we went over the full timeline, basically getting you to the winter meetings, which are about a month from now, in yesterday's episode. And so if you want to guide to the next month, check out yesterday's episode. That's like all we do is walk you through the next month and all the stuff that's going to happen. But really, the big activity, like you mentioned, with Ohtani going to visit with a lot of teams, so are these other players. Like you don't just see typically. It's very unusual for a guy like, coming off the season he had, like I said, with Blake Snell or Cody Bellinger. You don't just see them sign right away. Like, it takes usually at least around a month until you start to see the dominoes fall. And sometimes the big fish like Ohtani kind of holds up the market. And that's, to an extent, perhaps what we saw with Judge, although some dominoes really did start to fall right before the winter meetings, or like right as they got started. Like Trey Turner, I want to say he was like one of the first major dominoes to fall. But for the Giants, whether it's pitching or hitting, I don't know. I think, I don't know, Yamamoto, I'm assuming if he is still playing that he's probably not interested in like sitting down and hammering out deals. Plus, he has to be officially posted for teams to even start negotiating with him. Maybe Jung-hoo Lee, because I think they have interest, and if he's not playing, as far as I understand, depends on when he's posted. And then, yeah, I honestly don't know what their priority is, but I do know it just takes time, and I wouldn't expect much activity free agency-wise or even trade-wise to happen in it doesn't, in baseball, it does not just happen immediately. It's kind of a slow burn for it to get going. And then once it gets going, the floodgates can open, but it takes a while. Because I think, first of all, guys kind of want time off and they want to kind of gauge their market value. They don't just jump in at the first offer. And teams don't just make blow-away offers where they just ignore the rest of the teams out there. It just doesn't happen that way in baseball. So I don't expect that, and I don't think anyone should expect that. So coming up in just a minute, we are going to get into Cody Bellinger specifically, because the Farhan Zaidi has talked about wanting a pure center fielder, and in a lot of people's minds, Cody Bellinger came to mind almost immediately as one of the top options to fill that role. And so we're going to get into how do his advanced metrics look coming off the season he had, a rebound season following a couple of very disappointing years in LA. So we will get into it in just a minute. And before we do, All right, as promised, more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we are going to be breaking down, hopefully by like the time. I mean, I've been putting these out late at night. I could try to record Sunday night, so there's an episode Monday morning, except it might be best to wait on Monday because we're going to get a lot of news. And so that news coming on Monday, just look out for that, whether it's in the morning or in the evening, about the option decisions for Manaea and Stripling and Cobb, and then qualifying offer decisions. Will the Giants issue one? I think probably not this offseason, but it's possible. I think the only guy would possibly be Sean Manaea. It's surprising, but they've been so aggressive using the qualifying offer that if he opts out, they could then give him the qualifying offer, and I wouldn't put it past them. Let's just say that. So the next question is actually Bellinger related, but before we get into the other Bellinger question, Nicholas Bosa says Yamamoto, Bellinger, and Sonny Gray seem like must-get targets. Do you agree? I mean, I like those guys. That would be, to me, of the kind of, besides the Ohtani one, of the hypothetical off seasons I've heard. So you're getting a couple of really good starting pitchers there. Yamamoto, like I said, possibly going to get 200 plus million as a starting pitcher. Sonny Gray, you just wrote Gray. I assume you mean Sonny Gray. I don't think there's any other Gray available. Also a good starting pitcher, Bay Area ties. And Bellinger, they seem like must get. I'm never going to say there's must get targets. I just don't really view it that way, but I think all are fits for sure. So the next question from Michael, how do Cody Bellinger's advanced stats look? Is the risk worth the potential contract he's going to get? So we don't know what contract he's going to get, and I think that teams are probably, I'm not sure that 1 year of what he did in Chicago is going to, he was available on a 1 year deal for what, $18-20 million or something like that with the Cubs this last offseason because of how bad he was his last couple years in LA. He was non-tendered by the Dodgers. The Dodgers, the team that is so good at fixing players. But he had a good year. It really paid off for him to take that 1 year deal and have a rebound season. But the advanced metrics kind of look nowhere near quite as good as the actual results were. I think he had something like a 370 weighted on base average, which is really, really good. But the expected numbers were more like a 330 weighted on base average, which is just a little bit above average as opposed to like way above average. And so that's offensively. Defensively, the kind of metrics aren't in love with him as I think people think of him like he's like ultra elite defensively, but I think maybe more he's just above average versus elite. And so there's some risk there, but there's also, I think he is a good fit, and it's kind of a limited supply when you're talking about good defensive center fielders who can also hit. I mean, there's definitely risk, and if we're talking, 120, 40, $60 million or something, that is serious risk because he had two terrible seasons with the Dodgers prior to this rebound in Chicago, but he's still young, and before that he was like a 23-year-old MVP, and so he's one of the most fascinating free agents out there, no doubt. And I would be scared, but at the same time I would be happy if they signed him. But the advanced metrics the expected numbers kind of scare me off a little bit, and I think that will get priced into his next contract, honestly. So Darius says, with Farhan wanting to improve on outfield defense and find a suitable center fielder, do you see a potential trade of, say, Slater or Yastrzemski? And who would you personally feel comfortable trading? So the outfield does get crowded, and again, this comes down to Michael Conforto. If he opts in, then you're looking at an ultra-crowded outfield, and that's before trying to make an upgrade. You're looking at Haniger being under contract. If Conforto opted in, you'd be looking at Conforto under contract. And then you've got Yastrzemski and you've got Slater kind of forming a platoon. And then you've also got like a top prospect in Luis Matos as well. And that's before looking at upgrades. And so a trade becomes increasingly likely in the scenario that Conforto opts in. And even if he opts out, it's still pretty crowded. Although you could have, Haniger in left, Yaz and Slater kind of in right and in a platoon. Matos can be optioned, and then you can get that center fielder. But I definitely could see a trade, whether it's, Slater is like a half of a player. He doesn't really, he needs to be, if you get rid of him, you kind of have to get rid of the other half as well in order to really clear that spot. And so I could see them being traded together. They would have significant value, believe it or not, I think, in my opinion. If you trade both Yaz and Slater together, I think a lot of teams would be thrilled to have that group, that pairing. But more likely, I think they would try to trade Haniger or Conforto and hold on to Slater and Yastrzemski. I would much prefer that because Yaz and Slater, like we mentioned, there's limited money. You're not talking about infinite money here. And Yaz and Slater compared, financially compared to Conforto and Haniger are making much less. The combined salaries of Yaz and Slater will be half of the individual salaries of Haniger and Conforto respectively. So I'd much rather trade a guy like Conforto than Yaz and or Slater. But I really think you can't just trade Slater. That doesn't make any sense. So last round of questions is about the coaching staff, which I think we will know relatively shortly. And one of the questions is when are we going to know? So I'm just going to kind of read them all and address them all. JT says, do you think Bob Melvin will keep Alyssa Nakken on staff, or will she have to continue her coaching career elsewhere? We've heard reports. This isn't just me speculating, and I have been promising to talk about this more, but we've kind of heard rumblings that certain guys and, certain coaches, I should say, of Gabe Kapler's staff are likely to return, and Alyssa Nakken is one of them. And so I would expect that Alyssa Nakken remains on staff. She's not just she's a valuable member and well-liked and respected among the players and just in the organization. And so I would expect her to stay. And the official Patrick Bailey Stan says, I'm hearing rumors of ex-Giants joining Bo Mel's coaching staff, such as Pat Burrell, Ryan Vogelsong, and now recently JT Snow. Besides Pat, who I know would be part of our scouting department, I don't think there's much coaching experience there. Is it just a ploy to win fans back over? So we'll have to wait and see what the staff is, but I have expressed concerns of this sort. You're not there, besides Burrell, who does have coaching experience, Vogelsong and Snow, if you're just adding a bunch, I have said this, I do not want them just adding a bunch of formerly popular and still popular players to the staff just to win back fans. I don't think that's a good move. Maybe one guy you can do that with, but not a whole collection of them. And so I don't think that'll happen, but we have to wait and see. Michael says, a bit tactical, but when do you expect to get a more formal announcement on Melvin's staff? Lots of intriguing names being floated. And Farhan Zaidi said on the day of Bob Melvin's introductory press conference, which was now at least a week ago, right? It was more than a week ago. He said 7 to 10 days, and it's been about 10 days. So I would expect it any day now for them to announce that coaching staff. And so I look forward to it, and I will cover it as soon as it's announced. The last couple questions, Generic says, what's the likelihood of any of Kapler's staff being retained? If any, who fits Melvin's style? And so the names that have been mentioned include Alyssa Nakken, Kai Correa, Mark Hallberg. I think those names, Andrew Bailey, if he would maybe take a promotion and be director of pitching instead of just pitching coach, I've heard that that is a consideration as well, but there's a draw potentially to the east where his family is for Andrew Bailey. Last question, thoughts on whether the Giants retain Mark Hallberg? I think that they will. He's just another guy who's just really well liked and respected, and some continuity. I don't think you want to just rip the whole staff apart. It wasn't a bad staff. It's, to me, the hitting group may be in trouble more than any group, but Hallberg, I think he's done a good job as the third base coach. I don't know if Melvin wants Matt Williams. I think Matt Williams is probably coming over here, and that's the job that he's done, I think, with Melvin recently. And so we'll see. We have to wait and see. And I can't wait. And on Monday, we'll probably have that for you. And we'll have all those other things with the opt-outs and such, and qualifying offers. So a lot coming up. And thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, or your last listen, depending on what time you're listening. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance. And thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again on Monday, possibly the weekend if I can manage it. But it's been crazy, and definitely Monday. So I can't wait to be with you then. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.